If you're thinking about getting your very first triathlon bike, you are about to have a rude awakening because where triathlon bikes used to start at $1,000 to $2,000, now they are an eye-popping $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $15,000. You need to make sure that you are going to get enough bike that you are going to be happy with it and not actually get hosed on buying way more bike than you actually need. So in this video, we are going to talk about what you should be looking for in a triathlon bike, and I'm going to give you the 4 triathlon bikes that I think in 2024 all beginner triathletes should be looking at as their first bike. What's up, motivators? My name is Taren. When ordinary people want to accomplish something extraordinary in endurance sports, they choose our totally free Motive training plans. You ready to take on that next big endurance challenge? Let's do it. If you're just starting out in triathlon thinking about doing your first race, the answer for what triathlon bike you should get is whatever bike you have. If you don't want to spend any money on a triathlon bike or a road bike, and you have like a hybrid bike, a mountain bike, and you just want to do your first race, go ahead and use that. There is no rule saying that you have to use a certain type of bike. You can use whatever bike you want. The next consideration would be, all right, let's say you want to do fairly well in your triathlons and you don't want to just do it on whatever bike you have. You want to be fairly fast, but you also aren't quite sure if you're going to be a dedicated triathlete. You don't really care if you're being as fast as you possibly can. In that case, I recommend getting a road bike and not a triathlon bike. There are 3 reasons for this. The first is that a road bike is going to be able to be used in many more circumstances. You can use a road bike for group rides, you can use it for triathlons, you can use it for long rides, you can use it for bike trips. You can't really say the same for a triathlon bike. A triathlon bike is really just good for doing triathlons. A lot of road bike groups won't actually let triathlon bikes into their pack. Second thing about road bikes is that you're going to be able to do better training on a road bike. Because you're on a much more comfortable position, you're going to be able to put out bigger effort levels on a road bike than you are in a triathlon bike where you're scrunched into that aero position. This is how I used to train. I used to be on my road bike probably 85% of the time, and then 15% of the time I would be on that tri bike in that tri position, transferring all of that good work that I did in the road bike position into that tri position. The final reason why, if you're only buying one bike, it should be a road bike and not a triathlon bike is because triathlon bikes are much harder to sell than road bikes. There are many more road cyclists than there are triathletes, and almost everyone moves on from their first bike into the next bike. But let's say you know that you want to be a dedicated triathlete, and let's say that you want to be as fast as possible in those triathlons. In that case, you want a triathlon bike. The reason being that it's going to be much faster because you're into that aerodynamic position. Now, you can get into that aerodynamic position on a road bike, but the reason that triathlon bikes exist is because you can get into that aerodynamic position while your hips are still much more open. If you get into that aero position, you put on a pair of aero bars on a road bike, your hips close up by about 6-7 degrees more than on a tri bike. And if you can open up those hips on a tri bike, you're going to be much more comfortable when you get off the tri bike and have to run than if you were on a road bike. Now let's talk about 7 key factors that need to be present in selecting a beginner triathlon bike. The first one needs to be that if you decide to sell it in the future, it needs to be easy to resell. Almost everyone moves on from their very first bike at some point in time, and we don't want you sitting there with a $7,000 paperweight that you can't resell. Second thing is that it needs to be easy to upgrade and change the bike. We can't have a bike make that is so proprietary that you can't actually add on components and upgrade it as you progress as a triathlete. Price, ideally, well, used to be under $5,000, but now I say in and around $6,000. That $6,000 price point is around the price point where you can get a lot of bike that you're going to be happy with for a very long time. To make sure that it's easy to resell in the future, we want at least a mid-range group set, no entry-level group set. Looking at you, Shimano 105. Now we want to have disc brakes because in the coming years, almost everyone is going to be looking for disc brakes. It needs to be widely available. You need to be able to take it into any bike shop and have them be aware of what parts are needed, where to source parts, how to work on it. You don't want something that is so rare that it's really difficult for you to upgrade or repair. And then the final thing is you want a bike that you're going to be happy with for a long time. So with that in mind, these are the 4 bikes that satisfy all of those requirements. The first bike that I would be looking at is the Felt IA Advanced with the Ultegra group set. So what you're getting for $5,549 US is basically everything that you need. You've got integrated storage on the top tube here. You have storage on the back that is nice and aerodynamic. You have really deep section carbon layups here on the entire frame, which is going to make it nice and aerodynamic. The forks are really deep here. You have disc brakes, and then you have really nice Reynolds deep section wheels. You have an Ultegra group set, which is a mid-range group set. Shimano goes Shimano 105, Shimano Ultegra, Shimano Di2, Shimano Dura Ace. And then you can have Di2 if you need electronic shifting, but I think for a beginner bike, you don't need electronic shifting, because if you're ever looking to resell this, those entry-level group set bikes tend not to get sold very easily. So this is a very, very good bike. You could buy this and be very happy for a lot of years. The next bike that I like here is a little bit less bike, but it's also a little bit more affordable. So this bike here is listed in Canadian dollars. Now at this $6,250, that's Canadian dollars. So we're looking at roughly about $4,800 US. And with that, you get a SRAM Force Access. Now SRAM Force is comparable to Shimano Ultegra, so it's SRAM's mid-range group set, and then with Access you get electronic shifting, which I don't think you necessarily need if you want to save a little bit of money. What you're not getting with this bike that you were getting with the Felt is you're not getting as deep a carbon layup. So all of these tubes here are not nearly as deep as with the Felt bike. The fork is not nearly as deep, so it's not going to be as aerodynamic, but you're still getting disc brakes. You're still getting a decently deep wheel set. It's not quite as deep a wheel set as the Felt here, so you're seeing that there's not as much depth here. There's probably 80 millimeters deep, whereas these are probably 40 millimeters deep, but you're getting a bike that is actually quite a bit easier to work on. There's not as much of it that is actually integrated, so we don't have something like this on the top tube where we've got a nice integrated bit of storage and integrated bit of storage in behind the seat. You're kind of having to add all of that on, so that's additional cost there. But if you're really budget conscious, you can actually get this bike for less than $4,000 US. The next bike that I would look at for a beginner triathlon bike is the Quintana-Roo XPR. You have a fair bit of customization that you can do with this bike. You can get some really, really cool designs. As you can see, it's costing a little bit more money as you go up to these different paint schemes, but if you just want full black and then some sort of color with Quintana-Roo, you can get that bike for $4,000 US. But you want to get away from the Shimano 105 and go up to, say, a Shimano Ultegra or the SRAM Force. If you're going with just Ultegra and then some very narrow training wheels, you're coming in just over $5,000, but I would probably upgrade to some deeper section wheels like an NV disc. So what you're getting for, again, $6,195 is you're getting a bike that you almost never will have to worry about upgrading. You've got a decently deep down tube, you've got an integrated rear storage, you've got integrated top tube, you have very deep section wheels, you've got an Ultegra group set. So this bike here for $6,195 is really comparable to this $5,549 Felt. The final bike that I like that is probably the best bike out there when you can actually find it is Canyon. Now, I used to be sponsored by Canyon, which is why I have this nice setup here for the sound panel. The reason that I got sponsored by Canyon is because I can stand behind their value for the bike. Their value they have per bike is absolutely phenomenal. So the availability on this bike is not great. It comes in and out a lot, but for $3,299, you do get a very, very good bike. So you get that integrated storage on the top tube. I've had Canyon bikes. I've had all kinds of different Canyon bikes. They're super easy to work on yourself or for a bike shop. You've got more storage next to the bottom bracket. The cockpit here is really nice and very adjustable, so you can customize it and fit into it really well. But you're typically not going to buy this bike for $3,300. You're going to tend to buy something that has that Ultegra group set or the SRAM Force group set. You're also going to buy something that has a little bit deeper wheel section, because in triathlon, you tend not to want these 40mm deep wheels. You want, say, a 60mm deep wheel or an 80mm deep wheel on the front, and then certainly an 80mm deep wheel on the back. But once they get stock in this with Canyon, they tend to have these bikes spec'd out with this Canyon Speedmax CF7 disc with that Ultegra group set and with the option for a little bit deeper wheel set, with all of those nice integrations, a bike that's really easy to work on in between that $5,000 and $6,000 range. So that's what I'd look for in a bike. As you can see, there isn't a lot of availability for that. So I have no relationship with any of those bike companies, and I have no relationship with this last website that I want to recommend to you. As you can see, there's only really 4 bikes with limited availability that fall within that good beginner triathlete range. We don't have any sort of relationship with Bicycle at all. We're starting to talk to the company and I really like what they're doing. So this is kind of like eBay for bikes. So if you want to get a really good bike but are having a tough time finding one within your price range, you can go to bicycle.com and search triathlon bikes. And the cool thing about Bicycle is that because they're like eBay for bikes, their inventory for bikes is way more than something like a Pink Bike or a local Facebook marketplace. And what they do is they insure the deal to make sure that you don't get a bike that is not what you actually wanted or a bike that's damaged. So things to look at if you go on Bicycle are making sure your size is right, getting that Shimano Force or Shimano Ultegra group set, getting disc brakes, and ideally an 11-speed setup. Do all of that and you can probably get a bike that costs somebody else $10,000 or $11,000 for that $5,000 to $6,000. So hopefully that helps you out, Motivator. If you want to know everything that there is to know about triathlon bikes in comparison to road bikes, check the video that is on the screen right here. And if you want a training plan for your triathlon that is completely personalized for you, that is set for your abilities, your goals, your schedule, you can add all of the races that you want and it can be as low as free. Go to mymotive.com. Later, Motivators.